Alright, so I'm gonna be real with you all. I saw a highly disturbing video on the internet. This isn't a video to just complain. I'm not a troll. I don't try and start nonsense. I don't enjoy discussing things like this to start trouble. So I'm just going to explain the video and then explain why it bothered me. The video starts off with a guy in his truck or car or whatever, and he's driving along. He's recording with his cell phone, I guess, and he stops by some people who were loading groceries into the back of their SUV, I guess it was, and there was a man standing beside it and a woman loading groceries. She was pregnant and smoking, I guess, which is unhealthy, but whatever. And there was another man leaning against the side of the vehicle, and the recording man started heckling them, saying stuff like, I saw you buy your groceries with food stamps. Those are my tax dollars, and I saw you buy lottery tickets, and you have no right to do that. And he gets out of the vehicle, and he's saying some really derogatory remarks, things like, how can you do that with my tax dollars? And he takes a steak out of their grocery bag after they tell him, leave us alone. We can do what we want because it's our resources, which they have a point. It is their resources. They can choose to spend it however they want. I don't personally agree with buying lottery tickets in certain situations, but it's not my place to judge. But this guy had no right to take their steak. He said, steak is for people who pay taxes or have jobs or whatever, and he stole their steak and walked off with it and got back into his truck, and that's where the video ends. And it disturbed me on a very deep level because I grew up poor. I grew up in foster care afterward, which was still not a very rich life. And I was poor as an adult, and I do not foresee myself becoming rich. I don't. I mean, unless I don't know, marry a celebrity, which I really wouldn't want to do, or unless I inherit a crap ton of money, which I also really wouldn't want to do. I mean, or unless I invent something really freaking cool, which would be kind of cool, but I mean, money is just numbers, guys. It really is. It's little bits of paper that say, hey, I can have more things than you. Me, I'm the kind of person that would be like, hey, I can get all these cool things, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to have cool experiences instead. In theory, once I take care of all of my basic needs, I do have all of these things that I would want to share. If I'm going to the movies, I'm going to invite my friends. They can't afford it. Hey, I'll pay for you too. Come with me. I want you in my life. I'm not going to be stingy and be like, you can't afford it. You're not as good as I am. I'd be like, you can't afford it. I'll cover you, bro. Come with me. That's the kind of person I am, and that will not change. I will never look down on someone for being poor because I know what it's like. And here's some real talk for you guys. It is very, very difficult in America to be poor and save money at the same time. Because things like, oh, well, if you buy in bulk, you'll save money. Bulk items cost more than non-bulk items. So you would have to spend more on the outset in order to save more per unit. Like, those 3-pack of ketchup bottles? Like, if you eat ketchup and that's the only way you can, stomach the hash browns or the chicken nuggets that you buy for your lunch or whatever, well, the 3-pack of ketchup might be, $6. That's $2 per, bottle of ketchup. The normal bottle of ketchup, the single bottle of ketchup is like $2.30. Now, someone who has a lot of money and can spend $6 on ketchup, once every 3 months, will say, oh, why don't you just buy the 3-pack? It's cheaper per bottle. Yes, but if you can only spend a little over $2 for ketchup that month, you have to buy the $2.30 bottle of ketchup because that's all you can afford. Once you run out, then you go and buy another bottle. And it's a sad system, but that's all you can afford. And what might be a minor inconvenience to someone who has a lot of money could be a deal breaker for someone who doesn't have a lot of money. Things like bus money. Someone who can afford $10, $20 a week on bus money, that's $80 a month. If you don't have a spare $80 a month, taking the bus is not an option for a lot of people. And some people's finances are so close already, they don't have a spare $80 a month. If something happens, like they get sick and have to go to the doctors and they have a copay they need to pay, they don't have that spare $80. If say their pet needs to be put down and they need to pay vet bills to have that happen. If their car needs maintenance, they need to afford that. Yeah, stuff like that. I've lived in shelters, and one shelter had a 2-week limit. If you didn't get a job within those 2 weeks, which it's really difficult to get a job within 2 weeks, but if you aren't making money within 2 weeks, you have to leave. They will literally tell you, you cannot stay here. You need to leave. We don't care where you go, but you can't stay here. And that's when I lived in a tent. I was like, well, fuck, I don't have any place to go. So tent time. And it was summer, so it wasn't that bad. I still have it too. It's a little orange thing called the pumpkin. Yeah, I named my tent the pumpkin. It's a little kitty orange tent. I waterproofed the shit out of the thing, and I love it. I'm attached to it. I don't mind it. I did what I had to do. I've woken up to the thing covered in slugs. I've gotten stalked while living in it. I ended up camping down in a deer field, actually. Late at night, I heard rain on the tent. I heard the thudding hoofbeats on the ground. When I woke up the next morning, there were a bunch of deer nests around me. It was a really cool experience. Point being, I had to pack up every morning and move. So yeah, I had to move every day when I lived in a tent, because camping like that is illegal. So I have had to do illegal things just to survive, because I was living in shelters when I could. When I couldn't, I had to do illegal things. I snuck into my, at the time, boyfriend's house while him and his grandparents were on vacation. He gave me permission to be there, but his grandparents did not. Since he lived with his grandparents, that would have made for really awkwardness had I been caught by the police, but thankfully I didn't. Since he had given me permission, I did have permission from someone to be in the house. I would not have gotten arrested. I would have been asked to leave, but I would not have gotten arrested. Semantics, yay. Being poor is a problem in America, and there's really no easy way out, and it is a very hard life, and you don't know what someone else is going through. I have been told, why don't you just do this? Why don't you just do that? You're not trying hard enough. Well, how do you know what I have and have not tried? I can speak from my own experience that there are many things that you do not see. I have had to wear dirty, run-down sneakers that are flopping open at the heel to interviews because that was all I had, and I could not afford a fresh pair of sneakers, even from a secondhand shop. I have had to take a bus and stay overnight at a shelter once to get to a job for a one-day job. And the problem with that was the shelter had a policy that if you used them, you couldn't use them for another 6 weeks after leaving. So if I needed them again, I couldn't use them for 6 weeks. That sucked. But I was living in another shelter at the time that if I got a job and it was sustainable, I couldn't go back to that shelter. So had this other job worked out, and it was a one-day gig, but had this company offered me a steady job somewhere else, I would have had to have left the current shelter I was in, and I wouldn't have been able to stay at that other shelter. Tricky. Shelters only offer so much because they run on donations mostly. States funding is really thin right now because people vote against it because they're like, oh, poor people, they're just trying to live off the system, they're just being lazy. No, they're not. They are not being lazy. They just have some things that they're going through that you don't know about because you don't bother asking. I am not a bad person. I am a poor person. There's a difference. I am not lazy. I just have some situations that are really complicated. Very complicated. I, at one point, had to allow my insurance to lapse on my van because I couldn't afford it, because I was not making enough on my job. I had, at one point, 2 jobs. And I still wasn't making ends meet. I still qualified for food stamps. I still qualified for heating assistance. I still qualified for cash assistance. I still qualified for Medicaid. I still qualified for all of that, and I was working 2 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet. And that was me working 14 hours a day at 2 different jobs. Still couldn't make ends meet. Okay, and when I did let the insurance lapse on my van, I could have gotten arrested for driving it on the road. And I could not even pay for maintenance on the thing. Because if I spent my money on maintenance, I couldn't buy gas, I couldn't buy food, I couldn't buy anything. And my food stamps did not cover all the food I needed. My cash assistance didn't cover everything I needed either. The assistance I got still wasn't enough to make ends meet. The money that I was earning from my jobs still wasn't enough to make ends meet. Yeah, and me begging to live at people's houses. I overstayed my welcomes a few times in families' housing, in friends' housing, because they assumed that I was being lazy. Well, no. It's not laziness. It's very complicated situations that cost people what they have. And when you're homeless, it's very hard to get a job. When you're homeless, it's very hard to get a home because you have to have a job in order to get a home, but you have to have a home in order to get a job. These are truths. And a lot of the time, if you are not right smack dab in the middle of a city where everything is all set up for you, you need transportation, and the bus costs money in a lot of places. Now, there are some cities that have free buses, like Middlebury has a free bus system. But places like Plattsburgh, New York do not. Places like Burlington do not. Now, if you want to ride a bicycle, you could maybe work out a deal with a secondhand shop and be like, listen, I'm really, really poor, but I need a bicycle to get to work. Could you please give me one? But then if it rains or gets really cold or something like that, you're going to arrive muddy. You're going to arrive sweaty. You're going to get fired because that's not appropriate. Whose fault's that? Is it your fault for being poor? That's a really shitty attitude to have. And people should stop judging you for being poor. They should maybe want to help you. Like, oh, hey, we could carpool to work. Would that help you? Or, oh, hey, I know of a place where this guy's trying to rent his apartment out. Maybe he can work out a deal with maintenance. You do the handiwork around the house, the apartment building, and he can rent you a room, and it'll all be good, right? That's a thing, right? Until you can get back on your feet, just a little help. Now, there's a thing called the tiny house movement. Now, if the laws were switched around just a little to make it easier for these houses to be valid housing, a lot of the homelessness would be solved. So that way people could have permanent housing that is maybe alternative to living in a McMansion or living in a fancy apartment. People build their own houses all the time, and they are fucking amazing. People live in campers because they have no other choice, but because of that, sometimes they can't get emergency services like cash assistance or food stamps or whatever because they aren't in viable housing. Because it's temporary or because it's just not right. It's not acceptable housing. But if it's the only housing they have, where are they going to go otherwise? But If we change the laws, even just by community opinion, we can start a grassroots movement to approve the tiny house movement. That will give poor people who are so poor they can't even afford to live in a normal sized house enough of an edge that they can have a place to live at the very least. And people are doing it anyway. People are living tiny anyway because that's all they can do. And they are saving enough money to forward their lives so that they can stop being so dangerously poor that they can't move their lives forward. So if we change the laws so that people can actually build the size houses they need and nothing more, if we change the laws so that people can still receive benefits while living in places like campers, which campers aren't a bad idea, they're just a unique idea, and if done right, they're fine. They have their dangerous points, but if done right, they're fine. They'll work. They're not optimal for a lot of people, but I would do it. It's better than a tent. It's better than shelters. It's better than being shifted around from relative to friend to living in my van like some hobo. Because I'm not allowed to have a camper and still receive benefits because it's a second vehicle, because it's not actually a viable living accommodation. Or else it would count against my resources. See what I mean? The system is designed to work against the poor, the way it's set up now. So don't judge just because someone else decides to buy steak with their food stamps. They could have been celebrating a geriatric person's birthday. They could have been celebrating the guy getting a new job. They could have been, I don't know, maybe they took in a person with Down syndrome. Maybe that's what that person leaning against the side of the van had, and they wanted to give him a good meal for the night. And maybe that was what put their finances down below the poverty line. Taking in someone who could not work. Out of the goodness of their hearts, maybe they were doing something for someone who could do nothing for them in return. You don't know their life. You shouldn't judge. You shouldn't say to them, I deserve so much better than you because I'm doing so much more for the community. How would you know? Did you ask them? No. So don't judge. If you really, really want to do better with your life, do something for the community instead of judging them based on facts that you don't know. That's the point of this video, by the way. I know it's really long and rambling, but I have a lot of experience being homeless and poor and having a lot of catch-22s. So I've had to do laundry by hand for a very long time, for years at a time, actually. It's nice to be able to go to laundromat, but it's not required. This I know. It does take a lot of time out of your day, though, to do laundry by hand. So you can't have a full-time job and do laundry by hand. It's simply not possible. Not unless you want to spend all of your spare time doing housework, which creates depression and suicidal thoughts. And you need therapy, which also takes time out of your day. Yeah, it's a catch-22. You either have the time to be poor, or you have the time to force employers to hire you, which isn't really a thing. You can't force jobs to be there, and you can't force employers to treat you right. You can't just go out and pick up a job anywhere and expect it to work out. That's not the way jobs work. But yeah, this is my thoughts on this. I'll probably make another video because this is a really, really heavy subject. There's a lot to be said on it. Basically, the message of this video is don't be a dick.